The true message of the Way of Miracles is that my life and the lives of the people that I work with represent a story that underscores the point that people are more powerful, more capable of doing wonderful things and making miracles than they're presently aware of. The Buddha said, as we think, so we become. So if you want to become a miracle maker, you have to start thinking about yourself differently. For the past 35 years, I've seen 60,000 appointments. I started my practice in 1982 with the notion that I was going to be helping people lose weight. I'm thinking simple basic nutrition 101. Surprise, surprise, people started coming in right away with problems that I felt really badly about. I felt so much compassion for so many of these people that needed help. So I decided I was going to give it a try. As far as I knew, nutrition couldn't do half of what I ultimately found out that it can do, but it was a process of discovery, one person at a time.
So my name's Kate. I was 29 years old when my husband and I decided that it would be an ideal time to start our family. When it didn't happen immediately, we sought help from doctors and became increasingly more heartbroken and frustrated that we had not met with success. At such a young age, I was told by doctors that I had diminished ovarian reserve. I asked for a referral and was connected with a reproductive endocrinologist. They discovered immediately that I had a thyroid issue. That triggered something to me immediately. I'm 29, I'm not able to get pregnant, and I have thyroid issues. Why is this? The next layer of testing that I did with the reproductive endocrinologist revealed that I did not have the ovarian reserve that a typical 29 or 30-year-old had. And when I asked them about that, I was told that it was bad luck, that I had just drawn the short straw, and that was the way that it was going to be, and we could get over that through IVF treatments, but that was simply the way that it was, and perhaps that was a genetic component. I went through many failed cycles at the first practice that I worked with. I will never forget the day that I wrote that my doctor said that I was an anomaly. I looked across from her at the table one day and I said, "Shouldn't I be pregnant by now?" And she said, "Absolutely. The average person is pregnant by now." That was crushing. In addition to that, I had started seeing an acupuncturist because I was really looking for any avenue of medicine that was going to help me be successful. That's how badly I wanted this family. And she noticed that after my treatments, I would get hives, sometimes where the needles were. And when I saw her again, she said, "I want you to try going gluten-free because there is a link between skin rashes and hives and things like that and a gluten allergy." Going gluten-free, first of all, it eliminated my hives. But second of all, my thyroid function came back normal. That was when I was like, I need to pursue this avenue of my health a little bit more seriously. And that's when I connected with Mark. The first time I met Mark, I joined him in his office and I filled out a questionnaire about the food that I eat. I told him why I was there. And I was skeptical, so I didn't give Mark a lot of information. I wanted him to prove to me that he knew what he was talking about.
To this day, I think the most remarkable experience that I've ever had regarding epiphanies is the epiphany of my compassion leading me to the idea of nonverbal communication, opening up an energy field between my patients and myself that taught me everything I needed to know about them and more.
So he muscle tested me. He asked me a series of random questions. Are you cold? Which I knew was linked to my thyroid, but I didn't tell him I had a thyroid issue. He asked me if I sometimes got viral sores. And then he showed me a diagram of my body and said that my fertility issue was with my ovaries. I hadn't said anything about that. I told Mark I wanted to have a baby and I couldn't, but I didn't tell him that the doctors had identified that I had low ovarian reserve. So from muscle testing me and asking me 3 questions that indicated to me he knew exactly what was going on, my jaw was practically on the floor.
There's so much going on in a human being, so much going on that's nonverbal. And I'd feel that, I'd sense that, I'd perceive that at deeper sensory levels in my own being. I was learning things that I didn't know I had access to. But I opened up my heart instinctually and got back their answers instinctually as well.
He told me that I had like a retrovirus that was wreaking havoc on my immune system. He told me in that very moment what foods I could eat and what foods I had to avoid. And then he put me on a bunch of supplements. He told me, don't do any treatments in the next 3 months, but give me 6 months and I guarantee you will be pregnant in 6 months. So I went home and that day, cleaned out the cupboards, bought all the supplements, did my research. You know, I was nervous about taking all those supplements, but in the research that I had done, I learned that Mark was putting me on things that my body needed and should have been getting, and just wasn't because of modern day food and what we do to the food that we eat. So I checked back in with Mark at like the 3-month mark, and he said, like, I think you can, start a treatment now and go about your treatment. After 3 months on that diet, I had a completely different response. So prior to the diet and the supplements with Mark, I was producing 7 eggs that were resulting in 2 embryos that could be transferred back into me. 3 months later, I produced 17 eggs that resulted in 10 viable embryos to work with in order to achieve a pregnancy. I'll never forget, my doctor walked in the room too, like after those results had come out, and he just looked at me and he said, "Who are you? I can't believe what has happened." It did happen, and it happened right shy of the 6-month mark that Mark had promised. One of the things that Mark would do when my husband and I were meeting with him is he would actually call us mom and dad. When you would leave a meeting with him, you would say to yourself, he believes this is gonna happen to me, and he keeps telling me that I need to believe this is gonna happen for me as well, and that was transformational for us. And so there was the food and there were the supplements, but then there was also this piece about just remaining positive and believing that this would happen. Probably the best visit I've had with Mark was when I was able to bring my daughter in and meet Mark. And he looked over at her and she looked at him and she just let this ginormous smile out for Mark. And it was just one of those really special moments for me. And I think for Mark too. He said to me, the baby that people said wouldn't exist smiled back at me today.
Early on when I first started off, I was kind of surprised to hear that so many patients were having such a hard time with Western medicine. I thought to myself, that doesn't sound like what I was raised to understand. And I expected this highly technological, advanced system of medicine to be consistently errorless and to be efficient and to be capable, at least capable. But for me to find out that so many people were being mismanaged and getting sicker was an astounding reality for me. I couldn't believe it. I thought to myself, well, they have the technology, they have the money, they have the slickness, if you will. I don't have any of those things, but what I can make up for is compassion, concern, interest. When I work with somebody, I'm just positively determined to make sure it's going to happen. So I had patients that are stacking me up with issues that I was unfamiliar with. They were miles over my head, but it didn't stop me. One of the most incredible things that I stumbled on with whole systems medicine was this interconnectedness. There are all these different energy zones in the body, different acupuncture zones, meridians, if you will, and there are different ways to address the imbalances of organ systems because of the interconnectedness of energy. The Western world, we tend to think of those things as all separate. A kidney is a kidney, a liver is a liver, but they're all actually part of one electromagnetic family. Within the context of Ayurvedic medicine, food is one of the major forms of medicine. These are 4,000-year-old systems, so they had 4,000 years to work out the knots. How can you not embrace something that's been that well experienced? Everything is energetic. Everything. We're energetic, all our foods are energetic. The reactions we have with our foods are energetic. There's a system of energy here that says either good things are going to happen or bad things are going to happen with energy. So by eating a certain food that supports your energy system, you're feeding your wellness, your ease, you're feeding your healthiness. With negative foods, you're actually feeding your disease, your sickness. So I think it's important to realize that virtually everything we think, everything we eat, everything we drink, every sip, every bite, every encounter, virtually everything we do is energetically tied to this reality of universal chi, or life force. This idea that life force can be managed in order to make life better, that's really the basis and foundation of my work.
My name is Adulio. About 8 years ago, I was diagnosed with Parkinson's. My brother had it.
Yeah, we saw his brother with the symptoms that he had, and I noticed the similarities in my husband. Our neighbor has Parkinson's. My former boss had Parkinson's, all roughly a few years maybe before you, but their symptoms were a lot worse than yours. And then you started catching up to what they were going through.
Well, I used to work like a custodian, used to be a lot of walking. I used to stumble over my feet, sometimes fall. So he put me on Cinemat pills. They helped a little bit, but not much.
We'd all be walking along, a group of us, and I'd turn around like, where's my husband? And he'd be lagging behind, I could see the effort in him trying to reach us, and he couldn't. And that's when I'm like, well, this is really not good. And Doris, our close friend, knew Mark from previous situations, and she suggested we see him, and at first we're like, we're still sticking with our physician. He's got to do something right.
And it started just getting worse and worse.
And the swallowing was the scariest part.
Yeah,
when he would be eating, he'd
swallow.
always choke on his food. And they kept saying, well, we'll try something different. We'll try something different. And it just wasn't working for you. That too made me make the decision to go see Mark.
I had my doubts, but
Yeah,
I said,
'cause
it's getting worse. What can I lose?
where your brother ended up, you didn't want that to happen to you.
No, I didn't.
He did kinesiology on him and told us exactly what he could and could not eat.
Brought those little tube things and tested me with stuff what I can eat in my arm. I was like, who is this guy? I was like, this ain't gonna work. No way. And it worked.
He told him 21 days, you are going to see a difference. We're both like, okay. So he said, when we left that day, I am determined to go and do what he said. And I'm like, okay, we'll see.
When we got out of the office, we went to get the supplements right away.
I went out, bought the organics and all that he needed. He lost 30 pounds in those 21 days. And I'm like, you are a different person. His movements, everything, just, it was like, this is unbelievable.
So like they say, you are what you eat, it's true.
Yeah, it's like a miracle.
I think you have to be careful about the concept of turning diseases into a bunch of labels purely for the identification of a protocol that has a matching pharmaceutical drug or two. Well, in the case of Adilio, viral inflammation was causing the symptoms that were mimicking symptoms of Parkinson's neurodegeneratively. Symptoms are the language of the body. The symptoms lead you to the source. Listening to the symptoms and not shutting them off, in my opinion, is a much better idea.
When I go to my neurologist, they can't believe how well I'm getting. I walk 2 to 3 miles 3 times a week, and it feels great. Before I couldn't do it because I used to like stumble over my feet, sometimes fall. Or even before I tie my shoes, I'd have like a hard time making a bow and tying it. I'd be there for like the longest time, and now, no problem.
We're dealing with human beings that are like universes unto themselves, complex, deep. It's important that we understand that to just give somebody a label is to disempower them. I want to empower them by giving them answers so that they can take care of their own situation at home.
The way he's going now with how he's improved, if he didn't do that, I don't know how much longer he would be here. With what he's doing now, he's going to be around a lot longer.
What exists before the physician? What exists is a body, primarily a body with some symptoms that need to be understood. And this is such a small partial understanding of what this human being is before the physician. Helping medicine remember and come back to its roots is to help kind of heal current biomedical sciences and the practice of medicine. And these roots are the traditional whole medical systems. They've been at it a lot longer, for millennia typically, and they had enough time to figure out what a human being really is beyond the physical body.
Ancient civilizations have always talked about the power of thought, for example, in affecting our consciousness and affecting our health. And through tools in psychoneuroimmunology and neuroscience, we now know that our belief systems greatly affect our health, and that's actually influencing our endocrine system and our central nervous system. It's affecting the patterning of energy and information in our bodies. And that's why the way that we think, the way that we feel, has such a powerful role in impacting our health.
Orthodox medicine looks to quiet the symptoms. It's directed to the point of impact of the disease, the discomfort, the pain, the suffering. Somebody'd go to a traditional Western doctor for a migraine headache. The doctor would give them a medication that would actually deaden the nerve endings so that you couldn't feel the inflammation in your head. It's still there, but you can't feel it. My way of dealing with that holistically would be to say, let's find out if it's the liver that's causing the problem. It could be a high concentration of indoles and phenols and different chemistries in the liver that's causing liver inflammation. It's sending this message to the body, to the head, in the form of pain called a headache. And it could be a food allergy or food sensitivity to wheat, to dairy, to any one of a number of possibilities. To me, the most important facet is to understand the dynamics, the physics, if you will, of the disease, to get to the root of what's causing the pain, the suffering, and to be able to work systemically within the context of imbalances that are existing in those systems. I don't want to just shut the pain off. You're not correcting the imbalance.
I mean, we could ask the question, does the current medical system, as it's commonly practiced in the U.S., foster, does it mirror whole person medicine, where a physician really has enough time to query the person, how they're doing, their home life, their emotional life, in addition to their physical life and symptoms, and we just don't see enough of that.
My name is Michael, and I experienced sudden hearing loss. At first, I wasn't sure. I really didn't know about the severity of it. I didn't know if it was water in the ear from swimming at the beach, or I didn't know what it was, and was subsequently diagnosed with autoimmune sensory neural hearing loss. That was what I was told. Your immune system is out of whack. Your immune system is attacking your body, so we need to calm down your immune system. Treatment was prescribed steroids, and after a period of time, it seemed to work. And then about, I'd say 4 or 5 years later, the hearing loss came back again. Again was prescribed steroids, but this time it wasn't working quite as well as the first time. Called my doctor and said, hey, what's going on here? You know, when's this supposed to kick in? How long is it supposed to take till I get my hearing back? And the response I got was, well, it's not coming back. You know, it might not come back. You know, might actually get worse. And the goal of this treatment is to help stabilize where you are and try to keep it from getting worse as much as possible. It's not going to cure you. We actually don't know. We have a limited number of drugs, limited number of options to try. The only way we know if any of this works is if you tell us. And I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute, aren't you driving the bus? The message was to learn to live with it and manage it. Hearing aids, they talked to me about doing a condylar implant, and I actually got hearing aids. Even with the hearing aids, hearing was still not great. I was still having difficulty in conversations, talking to people. If I'm having a meeting, talking with someone in a business setting, and they're sitting across the table, I couldn't understand them. I couldn't hear them. It was not manageable. And so I said to the doctor, I called him up, said, look, this isn't working, and we got to do something else. I tried managing it, and he said, sorry, there is nothing else. And I just realized that, it's time to change course. You're not driving the bus anymore. Give me the keys. And that's when my first encounter happened with Mark. As chance happened, Mark moved into my building. He was just 2 offices down from me. I had heard about him from a number of sources, people telling me their experience, personal experience. In that first meeting, we spent about an hour, did his readings, his energy readings, muscle testing, asked me questions, interviewed me. Meanwhile, I'm sitting there with hearing aids and listening as best as I can. And then he says to me at the end of the hour, here's the problem. Your adrenal gland and your spleen, I think it was. That's the problem. That's the root of your problem. Here's how we're going to fix it. And he prescribed a diet and certain supplements, homeopathic approaches. He said, all right, well, listen, you can't eat X, Y, and Z. And I guess it's easier to think of what I could eat because a lot of things were crossed off. And he says, if you do this, here's how long it's going to take. Here's the result you can expect. And when you come back here, you're not going to be wearing those hearing aids. And I said, wow, okay. And I walked out of that office thinking to myself, I'm driving the bus.
There's 600 different lymphatic filters in the main body. They filter germs, bacteria, viruses, allergens, endotoxins, constantly filtering these poisons out of the body. You want them to flow, you want them to move. Back to the idea of flow. If they back up, things get problematic in the head, the eyes, ears, nose, and throat, etc. That's exactly what happened to Michael. His hearing is backed up because of the fact that his lymphatic was swollen with a lot of debris that wasn't being filtered because the spleen was weak.
Through an exposure to environmental mold, the mold had entered my body and become fungal. So what he was doing was cleaning that out. It was an adjustment for the diet, but it was very impactful. Hearing started improving, I would say, within a couple of weeks probably. Yeah, then after 3 months, I had actually, like I said, got rid of the hearing aids. I didn't need them. As a result of following Mark's protocol, I now have 90 to 100% of my hearing back. It is a maintenance as well. It's not the quick pill that we're all programmed to say, oh, you're one and done. But it's easy. It's a lot easier than you think. It's actually very empowering. It's a simple question. Do you want to be a slave to your palate, or do you want to be a master of your health? And I think most people would choose the latter.
Basically, science was predicated on the science of Isaac Newton's physics, which recognized the world or universe as two parts, a physical and an energetic realm, and that whatever was physical would be affected by physical things, and energy not being physical would not affect it. This led to the first separation in medicine of the separation of mind from body.
Biology in the West, in fact, since the 17th century, has been modeled on the machine theory of life. The heart's a pump, the brain's like a computer, the eye's like a camera. They're mechanisms, they're machines. But the mind's got nothing to do with any of this. In fact, according to the mechanistic theory of life, the mind doesn't do anything at all. It's a kind of illusion or that hovers around the physical activity of the brain, but it doesn't really influence the brain because that's impossible in a mechanistic worldview.
So when you think of mind and matter, it's two different things. Already you've broken simple laws of physics, laws of conservation of energy and matter, laws of thermodynamics. Lifting your hand has to be preceded by an intention. The hand can only lift if the hand and the intention and the source of the intention are the same entity. If they're two different entities, the hand won't lift.
We have been steeped in an era of what we call materialism in medicine and science. So what does that mean? It basically means that we have been fed a belief system that we are separate and that we are only physical, and that consciousness arises from physical processes such as brain function.
Western medicine is missing the boat with half the equation of reality, which is energy. It's dealing at a material level.
That fundamental split is a kind of an illusion of the reality of the whole person. So in that sense, Western medicine as it's currently practiced will never really be able to address the totality of healing of a human being.
What does the word physical mean? Well, it comes from the word physis, which is a Greek word which means nature. In fact, at the time of Newton, they called scientists, what we call today scientists, they called them natural philosophers. So physics is really about nature. Today, though, it has degenerated into something that's as well as material, it's something that's concrete, that's something that I can touch, etc., etc. And we know from physics that actually the touch that we have or feeling the boundary is an illusion in the sense that actually it's just electromagnetic forces.
Atoms, which were supposed to be the smallest particle in the universe when physics was being created, turns out that they looked inside and they found there were smaller particles. Oh my God, there are electrons, protons, and neutrons. So there are smaller physical things. But then the revolution came and they said, what are those small things made out of? What's an electron or proton made out of? And then they come down in some kind of metaphysical world like quarks. I go, what does all this represent? And it turns out there is no physical structure inside the so-called particles that create an atom. The atom is an illusion of matter. It's not real, it's an energy vortex. It's all like a nano tornado.
Einstein taught us E equals mc squared. Nobel Prize for teaching us about the theory of relativity. Energy and matter are interconvertible and transferable.
Do you understand E is equal to mc squared? So you say, well, on one side you have E, energy, on the other side you have m, matter. So Einstein said matter and energy are equivalent to each other. Are you going to call it matter or are you going to call it energy? So maybe a better term is mass energy. One word rather than mass and energy.
In 1931, Werner Heisenberg won the Nobel Prize for teaching us that energy makes up 99.999% of reality. We have our five sensory connection, our three-dimensional tendencies. So we're only able to see and perceive and connect with and communicate about and understand what we see and what we can touch and what we can feel. We don't go beyond that.
So in modern quantum field theory, the only reality is vibrations of energy. Those vibrations of energy are called quanta. They're called particles, condensed forms of energy.
Matter itself is made up of fields and energy. Energy is what makes things move, act, have activity, and fields are what give shape or form to the way the energy is organized.
And if we take a step further, it starts to clarify a much bigger picture, that we are electromagnetic beings, we're energy beings, that everything is energy. Diseases are energy, viruses are energy, bacteria are energy. There's a process, there's a dance that takes place between our energy and the energies around us and within us. When we lower our frequency, our energy, our verve, our life force, we run the risk of lowering our electromagnetic frequency into a range that harmonizes with viruses that are capable of affecting our neurological beingness.
Albert Einstein's very famous quote comes right here. The field is the sole governing agency of the particle. Energy is the sole governing agency of matter. Energy is the force that shapes matter. We've excluded energy from all the sciences because they were Newtonian. It doesn't mean Newtonian science is wrong. It's just a small subset of a bigger science called quantum physics. And quantum physics is the energy universe that we live in.
One thing that a number of healers say, regardless of their healing tradition, is they talk about information that is stored both within the body and outside of the body. The biofield is a set of interpenetrating and interacting fields of energy and information that guide our health. So you have kinesiologists and energy healers talking about how they can get information about a person's history, their memory, even their emotional state from informational fields around the body.
What's the definition of field in physics? A simple definition? Invisible moving forces that influence the physical world. I go, well, this is amazing because ancient word spirit is invisible moving forces that influence the physical world. Quantum physics is giving us the insight that spiritualists had always talked about without a scientific foundation. Now, there's a science of energy.
My name is Elizabeth. I had breast cancer in 1996. I went off on vacation, found something hard, and basically was filled with dread immediately from my first encounter with that lump. Within a couple of weeks, got the diagnosis, yes, you have breast cancer. It had to be chemo for 6 months and radiation for 3 months. Then I first had a lumpectomy. And after the lumpectomy, in my heart, I felt that it was gone. I felt like that's where I should end, but I was very fearful. I had 2 young girls, kindergarten, 2nd grade. So I began the chemo, dreading it, feeling like it was just the wrong thing to do. By the end of the 6 months, I was physically a wreck. It really took a toll on me. I felt so unwell in every way I can possibly describe. And I had no energy, I was nauseous, I felt weak, eyelashes, eyebrows gone, hair, just to see the impact all over my body physically, but inside of me, I just felt like I was a walking dead person. I had the life sucked out of me. I tried to stay on track in my life for my girls, so I would go in and help in the classroom as much as I could, but I just remember sitting in those little chairs in the kindergarten room and trying to do something with a child and just like, oh my God, just trying to get through the process and be up for them and be myself. But it was hard. It was hard. When the 6 months were up, my daughter in kindergarten had a friend over for a play date. It was the very first time they played together. I didn't know her, I didn't know the mom. But when her mom came to pick her up, she pulled out an appointment card and handed it to me, and she said, "This man can help you. I have an appointment with him next week, but I cannot make it. And if you were to try to see him, it would be months down the road. He has a long waiting list. So here, take this, go see this man next week." And I had no idea who it was, why I was going, but I went. I just felt it was a strong message. I needed to pursue this. So when I went to that appointment, my very first time meeting Mark, I can't even describe how different that appointment was from any doctor's appointment I'd ever experienced before. It was just a whole different world of talking about health, your body, disease, energy, your spirit. He just wove everything together versus just talking about your body and what drugs we're going to put you on next.
There's a more meaningful experience that's taking place just based on the talk, just based on the conversation. So the minute you come in, you're feeling that you're being addressed at a deeper level in ways that you don't even address yourself, perhaps.
He taught me things that I just had no idea were a part of wellness, like your pH. It's often too acidic. And that's the environment in which cancer cells thrive.
And disease in general, cancer included, is an obligate anaerobe. That means it doesn't like oxygen. Disease can't live where there's oxygen. But by the same token, sickness manifests quite readily where there's not an alkalinity and not a lot of oxygen. Sugar produces a very strong acidosis in the body.
Sugar, 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 sugar. I've been a sugarholic since I was a child. So that just made so much sense. He sent off a hair analysis, and that yielded a lot of information about what was going on in my body in that moment and what we needed to do to bring ratios back into balance. And in that appointment, I just learned so very much. That was the beginning of my feeling empowered. Like, I have a role in being well here. So we worked on my diet, worked through supplements and food to get me healthy again, make me feel like myself again. And I trusted everything he said. I took everything he said, and within a few weeks' time, our family was going off on a ski weekend with another family, our best friends. I was going with them, but I was just going to be staying in the lodge, not skiing, obviously, because I had no strength or energy or the wherewithal anywhere in my body to do that. But when we got there, the first morning, everyone was going off to ski, and I thought, it's gorgeous out there. I actually feel pretty good. Maybe I'll try this. So I got some skis, went out on the bunny slope, and I just took off. I said, I gotta go, I gotta try this. I think I can do it. And I did, and I literally was going down this hill singing and crying, which I'm gonna do now. Just filled with joy, because I was back. I was back. It took a few weeks. That's all it took. Eating properly, eating the right foods, taking the supplements that brought me back to life in no time. It felt like a true miracle. It truly did.
Healing is you breaking through the walls of limitation. It's building confidence. It's building determination. It's reaching beyond your grasp. It's breaking through the thresholds that are binding you unconditionally.
Every now and then people ask me, when they learn I had breast cancer, how long's it been? And I do the math, and it just amazes me. It's now been 22 years.
There are all kinds of aspects of the biofield that we already know about and that we measure. So for example, we can place electrodes in our head or on our heart, and we get these electromagnetic readouts, right, from EKG and EEG, and those tell us about our clinical condition, our heart health, and our brain. So those are aspects of the biofield. We can even study the biofield of cells. We can look at electromagnetic readouts of the cells, and we can look and see how using electromagnetic energies affect cellular health. That's pretty well known and studied, and it's really a booming area in regenerative medicine, for example.
When we put electrodes across the body, which is done in hundreds of thousands of times every day in doctors' offices, you're measuring current flow. And whenever we have a current flow, you create a magnetic field. Every time the heart beats, it also produces an electromagnetic field. The heart's the largest source of rhythmic electrical energy in the body. So the heart's magnetic field can be measured with today's equipment about 3 feet from the body. We've actually proven and published now in peer-reviewed journals that the magnetic field of the heart is carrying emotional information. We currently have about 75% accuracy in knowing what the person's feeling, whether they're conscious of it or not.
We are energy beings. And the biofield is the energy field of our bodies. And it's an organizing field. I believe that all of the chemistry and physiology of the body is controlled ultimately by the biofield, but still the consciousness or the mind is the master of the biofield. And the biofield we see as a bridge between the mind and the body.
Your energy field has a consciousness. It thinks, it feels, it's part of your living force. We're designed to react energetically to everything. It's part of our neuromuscular defense system. So again, if you're sitting at home relaxing and you hear a shot go off in the neighborhood, you're gonna jump. That's part of your neuromuscular defense system trying to protect you. Our bodies are designed to react not just to those circumstances in those fashions, but everything. If I have you raise up your arm and I calibrate you and I say, look, if you hear negative images, negative thoughts, your arm's gonna be weak. If I give you positive images, love, happiness, you're gonna get strong. In the same way, we can actually call out foods, wheat, dairy, and get you to react and respond. You line up 100 people, they're going to have different positives and different negatives. That's the beauty of everybody's energy field, because you are a conscious, living, dynamic awareness. You and I are fields of living awareness. So we're tapping into that field of living awareness with intention. That's how we find out what's going on with the body. We tap in energetically, find out what kind of systems are breaking down and how we can build them back up and balance them. If somebody gets a migraine headache or a stomach ache, they're not thinking about energy. They're thinking about their physical properties. My head hurts. Your head to you is something material and physical. But I challenge people to think that when you get into the why does your head hurt? You start to move into energy. So your headache might happen because you ate a food that's causing an inflammation. That's the transference of energy. So again, 72% of all disease is inflammatory, but 99.999% of all activity is energetic. Inflammation is happening at an energetic level.
My name is Yelena. In 2009, I started getting headaches. My vision started getting worse, and I went to see a doctor. After MRI, she said, well, there is bad news. You have meningioma, brain tumor, size of walnut in your head. And after I went to see a specialist, he said there's nothing we can do besides surgery. There's two types of surgery. One, they go through your nose, and the other one, they open your skull. And since my tumor was too big, they couldn't remove it through the nose. They had to open my skull. The surgery was done, everything was perfect. My vision came back after I was completely blind, and I started seeing again. I was very happy. I was very happy for a year, and about a year, and then my symptoms start coming back. I went to see a doctor again, and he did MRI, and he said, well, there is bad news, tumor come back most of the time, and it started growing again. I asked, why? What is the reason? Why is it coming back? Why is it growing again? And he said, nobody knows. And at that point, I said, no, it's not coming back. It's not growing. I'm not going through second surgery again. And I started looking for some other ways. And a friend of mine recommended me to see Dr. Mincolla. At that point, I was ready for anything, just not to go through surgery again. My first appointment with Dr. Mincolla was surprising for me, actually. He put his finger right here and then started pushing my hand down and asking questions like wheat, sugar, dairy. And every time my hand fell down, it meant that I can't eat particular food. In order to avoid surgery, I need to change my diet and go strictly with everything what Dr. Mincolla told me. I would have to come every month so he can adjust my diet through muscle testing and change some supplements.
We all have a genetic map when we're conceived, and there's mutations on our genetic maps, potentials and possibilities for disease that can manifest in accordance with our hereditary patterning. But these can't express unless there's something to trigger them. Things like sugar and allergies like wheat allergies end up driving up the arachidonic acid levels, which drive up the leukotrienes and the COX-2 hormones. Many diseases follow this pathway of inflammation.
My headaches start disappearing and I start feeling better. Everything came back to normal life. And after about 2 years, I went to see my doctor to do MRI. He did MRI and he said, listen, I don't know what you're doing, but keep doing it. Your tumor is shrinking, it looks great. And he got very excited with my results. I've been tumor-free for 9 years now, and I keep following diet. Sometimes I cheat a little bit, but in general, I follow Dr. Mincolla's recommendations. The diet works, supplements. I think this is a miracle, the food, energy. It's incredible to know that with changing diet, you can shrink tumor and feel great again.
Coming from a physical point of view, which is physics, of course, quantum physics, we quickly get to the point of what is the mind and how does the mind interact with matter, what is called matter, and what is the nature of reality? So these are deep questions, but they really come down to what, in fact, any human being experiences, which is our own mind. So when we talk about health, a lot of times, particularly in the West, we really mean health of the physical body. However, as the ancient Greeks first said, you know, you can't have a healthy body without a healthy mind.
There's two little words, internal and external. When somebody has a bunch of problems like headaches, rheumatoid arthritis, stomach aches, whatever the case may be, we want to know if the lion's share of those problems, if most of those problems are being caused by something internal or external. Internal is spirit, emotion, thought. External is cells, tissues, organs, the body. So we want to make sure we have a distinction here. We know the difference between the internal self and the external self. Our culture has kind of programmed us to think of ourselves and associate and identify with ourselves from the perspective of physiological, the idea of external, as I would call it, cellular. We don't spend a whole lot of time going internally, relating to the concept of self from an internal perspective. We don't understand emotional IQ or emotions. We don't understand spirit very well. We don't understand so many very powerful, powerful components of self that have a great deal to do with disease and healing. And one of the key messages of the Way of Miracles is that people have a very powerful internal self. People have a very powerful spirit. People have a very powerful emotional self, a very powerful mental self. These unseen, invisible, extrasensory components of self that exist beyond the parameters of the five senses are the missing link to human greatness. So there's two types of medicine: prevention, intervention. When it comes to acute disease, trauma, accidents, interventive medicine is essential. When it comes to chronic disease, chronic ailments, the expression of genetic weaknesses, etc., that's where holistic medicine shines. Every disease has a causal root. Every disease. Inflammation is going to push the buttons. Stress and tension is going to push the buttons. Trauma is going to push the buttons. Any of those circumstances, they're capable of triggering a lot of those genetic realities.
Most people have been programmed with the belief about genetics. And in that science, we talk about something called genetic control, that the genes control our physical traits, but then we also went on to say that genes control our behaviors and emotions as well. And that leads to an understanding that we are victims of our heredity. Whatever is running in my family, I can anticipate that I shall likely express that as well. In contrast, there's a revolution, and this scientific revolution is based on a science called epigenetics. Epi means above. And I said, what's the above? I said, well, the environment. But then all of a sudden I say, yes, but between the environment and ourselves is a mind. And so the mind not just reads the environment, but it also provides an interpretation of that environment based on our programming and learning experiences. Epigenetics can change the readout of the genes based on the signals from the environment. I can create over 3,000 different protein molecules from the same blueprint based on epigenetic control mechanisms. Since it's based on the environment and our perception of the environment, those are things that we can control. Genetics gave us the belief we were victims of heredity, and epigenetics turns the table because epigenetics says we are masters of our genetic control because we can control our perceptions and we can control our environment.
You know, about 50 years ago, the field of psychoneuroimmunology didn't even exist because in Western science, we didn't even believe that our mind and our emotions could affect our physical health. But that has changed dramatically, and over the last 50 years, we've not only learned that the brain is connected to the immune system and the hormonal system, but our emotions affect us deeply.
More often than not, the root of disease is energetic. It's emotional imbalances that cause physical sickness. It's grief, it's anxiety, it's unresolved. So emotion that's unresolved puts us in a stress chemistry state that triggers the psychosomatic response, bridging from the immaterial to material. The mind and the body are one thing. They're one field of energy. And there's more chemistry that's produced in your brain than there is in the downtown pharmacy. As we think, so does our body go.
The nervous system is perception, reading the environment. But the mind is an interpretation of the perception. When the brain interprets through the mind that this is a stress, it's usually time to engage what is called fight or flight. I got to get out of here, I got to save my life, or I got to engage, I got to do something. I say, that engagement involves arms and legs. When we're at rest and at peace, the blood flow is principally into the viscera and into the head, where we nourish the organs that keep us healthy, maintain our bodies, and just watchdog of how the system is working. Stress hormones cause the blood vessels in the gut to squeeze shut. That pushes the blood to the outside. It shuts off maintenance of the body. The immune system is one of the most energy-using systems in the body when it's working. Stress hormones shut down the immune system to conserve energy so we can use that energy for fight or flight from the exterior threat. And then there's a last one, which I always call insult to injury, because the blood vessels in the forebrain conscious area squeeze shut. That pushes the blood to the hindbrain, which is reaction, reflex, no thinking, response. And so the three effects of the stress hormone, shutting down the growth and maintenance, shutting down the immune system, and it shuts down intelligence because thinking is too slow in an emergency response. In today's world, stress is 24/7, 365. We were never physiologically designed to have that interference with growth in the immune system and intelligence for long periods of time. So now it turns out up to 90% of illness on this planet is directly connected to stress.
All the while we're being raised and we're moving through our earlier period in life, there's a soul that's observing silently all of our life process. We touch upon it from time to time. We get closer and then further away. The challenge is to lock into it, to identify with it as source, as true self. We have a conscious mind that processes 2,000 bits of information per second. We have a subconscious mind that processes 400 billion bits of information per second. The conscious mind is in the moment, thinking about life, solving problems. The subconscious remembers everything. You could take a drive from here to New York. You look at a license plate, you look at a tree in the distance. That's stored forever in your subconscious mind. Superconscious is entirely different. It's referred to spiritually as the Atman or the Brahman. It's higher thought. It's elevated thought. It's limitless thought. To attain that higher consciousness is ironically a matter of doing less, not doing more. We can develop and become aware of superconsciousness through a lot of meditation, prayer, going within ourselves, operating at a deeper level beyond our mundane level of consciousness. Most of us live in beta brainwave states. Stress, stress, stress. Stress can be dealt with in a variety of different ways. One of the most important ways is deep meditation.
Meditation, prayer, yoga, dance. There are a number of different ways, but really the key is simply to drop into an awareness of the subtle in every moment, letting our minds quiet and really allowing ourselves to feel deeply in our bodies.
When you start to quiet the mind through your meditation, you move into the meditative state, which is alpha, and things start to slow down. And when things slow down, possibilities open up. You start to move closer and closer into the superconscious realm by calming our nervous system at a deep, deep level, by cultivating peace. Cultivating peace means you don't embrace negativity. You don't get stuck on it. You move past it. It's the question of whether you're controlling your mind or your mind is controlling you.
My name is Elizabeth. I basically just grew up a really sick kid. I was in and out of children's hospital multiple times per week for periods of time growing up. Always had a cold or some sort of virus or flu or scarlet fever or mono. I had like pre-diabetes or was pre-diabetic, hypoglycemic. When I was 18, I was a freshman in college. I woke up one morning with debilitating pain, like truly debilitating. I went to the ER then, and eventually after lots of tests found out that I had pancreatitis. Doctors were not sure why at first. They did more tests and tried to figure it out, and eventually they found out that I had an atypical form of cystic fibrosis. I just read a lot of stuff about typical cystic fibrosis and how life expectancy can be very young, mid-30s, younger. That was just, I would say, a tough time in general, starting to think about these things so young and wondering what was going to happen in the future. Another doctor that was really significant during this time was my GI. I remember one of the first questions I asked him after I got diagnosed, will I still be able to study abroad? Like, is this still possible? And I was all excited. And he kind of paused. And I remember he looked down at me and he was like, we'll try our hardest to get you over there. I just kind of realized this is serious. My mom made an appointment for me with Dr. Mincolla, who was recommended to her by a family friend of ours. My mom and I came prepared with like my massive file. And I remember being like, do you want to see my blood work? He was like, no, I don't need any of that.
Elizabeth was a little bit of two different issues converged. Her pancreatitis, of course, had a lot to do with carbohydrates, starches, sugars, processed foods. I think that her atypical cystic fibrosis is more correlated with a lot of the stress that she was under, as well as her diet, which had to be largely an anti-inflammatory diet as well.
He gave me a list of foods and he said, basically eat these foods and don't eat these foods because these foods react well to your body and these foods don't right now. The things he was telling me to cut out were things like wheat, gluten, dairy, soy, corn, yeast, vinegar, nuts, seeds. Yeah, we walked out, I think, kind of unsure if I was really gonna stick to his protocol and if it was really gonna work. And then, oddly enough, I woke up the next morning with pancreatitis and had to go to the hospital. I realized in a big way that I have a pretty high level of responsibility when it comes to my health and decided to follow Dr. Mincolla's recommendations to a T. Once I kind of got a ways into following the protocol, realizing that I could get healthy and was getting healthy and was healthy, it really made me realize that I and we have the capacity to heal ourselves. I was like, why is not everybody shouting this from the rooftops? All this time, my body was trying to talk to me. It was almost like it spoke a language that I didn't understand. It suddenly opened up all of this space to explore other things, like how can I become even healthier and how can I not only make my body healthy, but how can I make sure my mind and my spirit are healthy.
We worked spiritually with her quite a bit, trying to get her to understand that she didn't have to carry her stress in a daily nervous system that was peaked. A lot of people just don't edit their stress, they carry it. And I think that we talked to her a lot about changing her whole chemistry at an emotional and a mental level as well, and not accepting that stress.
Eventually, a couple years later, really, I did kind of look back and realize, like, I'm living the way that I was told I wouldn't be able to live. I think that moment happened while I was studying abroad. You could say, like, maybe proving my GI doctor wrong, who seemed to not have a lot of faith in the possibility of me going over there. The biggest thing that this whole journey has given me, and seeing Dr. Mincolla has given me, is a new relationship with myself and the way that I interact with myself. There is some level, I believe, of the divine in all of us. I think we're here to recognize that in each other.
Emptiness, clarity, openness, flow is the direction we need to start operating our minds in, and to understand that we can apply it to making miracles. Miracles are exceptional, they're extraordinary. In order to produce extraordinary possibilities, we need to use our extraordinary machinery. And there's nothing more powerful than the superconscious mind.
Regeneration is inherent in all life, and this enables the ability to recover from diseases, wounds, and injuries. We have it, of course, in wound healing. You get a cut or a scratch, and then it heals itself, the skin heals up.
The human body is actually not a thing, but a process. And it's a process of recycling.
The blood is being regenerated all the time, and the intestinal lining and the skin is continually being replaced. So this ability to heal and regenerate is just intrinsic to the very nature of life. Humans were healing and regenerating and recovering from diseases long before doctors came along, or even shamans. In fact, everything that's alive on the planet today has had ancestors that have survived for several billion years. Otherwise, none of us would be here. So we rely on this intrinsic healing capacity of the body. And the healing capacity is influenced by nutrition, the environment. It's also influenced by emotional and mental factors.
Your consciousness is translating your experiences into chemistry, and that chemistry could be chemistry that supports health or chemistry that supports protection. So we find ourselves in a mutual exclusive situation. Am I in growth or am I in protection? I say, well, then it's based where your thoughts are.
We've been very interested in the phenomenon of gratitude, particularly in our cardiac patients. It's really been remarkable in the sense of the literal power when you help a person activate and engage in some of these foundational, I consider them attributes of the soul itself, and bring it more as a daily activity and practice and perception in their life. They change spiritually, get healthier, and depressed mood reduces, their fatigue level reduces. We've done a lot of blood work on these patients, looking at traditional biomarkers of cardiac function. These go down dramatically, which normally doesn't happen. But for example, we had a group of patients randomized keeping a gratitude journal. And we asked them every day, please write down 2 or 3 things that you're grateful for. At the end of those 8 weeks, the patients who had been assigned to gratitude journaling had about a 24% reduction in the inflammatory load as we measured it. And the patients who continued as usual care, they either stayed the way they were, or they got a little bit worse over those 2-month periods. So this is very powerful.
When we're feeling things like compassion, love, gratitude, kindness, we naturally go into more heart coherence, which is, if you look at it on the graph, it's kind of a sine wave looking rhythm. But to have that rhythmic pattern means a lot of beneficial things had to go on inside of our body for that to occur. So it's reflecting not only increased synchronization within the different parts of our brain and nervous system, but synchronization between our blood pressure rhythms, our heart rhythms, our respiratory rhythms. The heart and brain, they get measurably more synchronized. So we now know, many hundreds of studies later, that this is an optimal state. When you're feeling frustrated or anxious or overwhelmed or these types of feelings, the heart's rhythm, the pattern of it, becomes very chaotic looking. So that is literally reflecting a lack of synchronized activity within the brain and nervous system. And I think that's why a lot of people call them negative emotions.
And when people are depressed, and that's a common feature typically of cardiac disease, depression itself tends to be a phenomenon of contraction in the world. People feel more and more isolated. But gratitude as a practice is an opening. It's a willingness and a reopening out to the world around them, and that's what the patients would report.
While we talked about what fear does, releasing the stress hormones into the system that readjust the physiology of the body, we also have to recognize that love also releases chemistry, but totally different chemistry than fear. Love releases wonderful chemicals such as dopamine, pleasure. We release vasopressin, that makes partners attractive to each other, so that holds that bond. The bonding is from oxytocin released in love, which says connect with this source of love, and growth hormone. And that name is obviously, it causes a growth and maintenance of the system, because love is the chemistry of health. Stress is the chemistry of protection. So I say, well, then I'm changing the environment inside based on the consciousness.
The fundamental common element has to do with connectivity. The average person lives a life of perceived separation from other people in their environment, from the world itself. And I think since that is a fundamental illusion, the presence of that illusion in the person's psyche is always a bit of a strain and a stress as the time goes on.
The mind is not the brain. The brain is a biological form that lives inside your skull. It's like a heart, a liver, a kidney, and a gallbladder. But the mind is a very different property. It's an infinite property. I always like to say that the brain is somewhere, the mind is everywhere.
We have an understanding that consciousness, which is controlling our biology, is in our head. We put wires on a person's head, it's called electroencephalograph. I'm reading brain function. I say, yeah, but where is it? It's inside the head. And electrical activity is conducted to the skin. That's where the electrodes pick it up. There's a new device called magnetoencephalograph, not EEG, MEG. And this is mind-blowing. The probe doesn't touch the body at all. The probe is out here, and they're reading the consciousness activity of your brain. Stop. The point is this: your thoughts are not contained in your head. You are broadcasting your thoughts into the field.
Many of us have had experiences of being around someone where we left feeling really charged up, or the opposite, we felt drained. My emotions actually go beyond my skin. They affect others. My thoughts actually affect the field of energy around me and can affect others.
When we're in the heart coherent state, loving, compassionate, kind states, several studies are now showing that that actually has a lifting effect on the others within our field. So our nervous systems seem to be exquisitely tuned to the magnetic fields produced by other people.
Everything made out of energy is interconnected because energy has no barriers. That means everything in the universe is part of the same energy. And that means no separation.
Ancient medical systems were based on spiritual traditions that understood the interconnection between spirit, earth, the elements, our bodies, and our emotions. They are all connected. Now this may seem, really like, how does that work? But basically they had worked out these systems really well. And what we experience as pain, depression, is really due to a lack of harmony within ourselves and our environment, right? So it's really based on a different cosmology. From a biofield point of view, the biofield is basically giving us information about our sense of harmony with ourselves and our environment. So when acupuncturists talk about stuck energy, or an energy healer says, you've got energy stuck in a particular chakra or a meridian, what they're talking about is an imbalance in the system that needs to be moving towards harmony. And so the more we pay attention to these subtle aspects of being, the energetic feelings that we get from everything around us, from our emotions, our thoughts, our interactions, the more we're realizing we're not separate.
My name is Diane, and I've been a patient of Mark Mincolla's for 36 years. One of the main issues that we addressed during those 36 years was my being an addict. I gave up alcohol when I was 26, and I went on to bigger and better things, thinking nothing. I didn't even think I was an addict, really. And I'm in the music business, so in the 70s, cocaine was it. It was great to have it. I was powerful. I could give it to everybody and celebrate, and I was told that it was not an addictive drug. That's not true. And for the next 8 years after I started, it was pretty much a living hell. I functioned, I worked, I did all the things you do, but spiritually I was just getting broken down. I was going to a therapist, I was very messed up, and I didn't feel well physically, and he said, there's only one person I know for you to go to. And I was so desperate, I didn't care who it was at that moment, I thought. And then I walked into his office, and I left saying, I'm not going back there. He's just not a good fit for me. He's too arrogant. So I went back to therapy, and I progressively got worse, mentally, physically, spiritually. And the physical aspect was getting horrible, and the therapist said, I can't help you if you don't want to see Mark Mincolla. You got to go. And I walked in, and I told him I didn't like him. I told him I thought he was arrogant, but that I was desperate, and I needed someone to help me. And I sat there with my arms like this the whole time, in fighting mode. And he looked at me at one point and he said, I'm here for you, forever, whatever, doesn't matter. You can be whoever, because I said, I'm not giving up cocaine. He said, that's okay, I'm here for you. And that was it.
So when a patient like Diane comes in to see me, I just made it my #1 obligation not to go to her spirit, but to go to my soul. Because if I go to your spirit, I'm going to go down with you. Part of the reason energy is contagious is because you're coming from a place that's not source. So the person that's with you is not in source. Guess what? You're not going to be in source. So by the same token, Diane comes in, she's in broken spirited mode. I'm not going there. I'm going to my soul. I'm going to ground both of us. There's a contagion there that's more powerful.
When I went there, I strictly went there for physical purposes, I thought. But there's something about him. When you walk in his office, he knows who you are. Not your mind, not your story. He knows the essence of your being, and right away the healing starts. I was living thinking, well, I came from messed up background. I blamed it on everybody, and I didn't know what the root of it was.
So self-contempt is something that's been programmed in our lives. We tend to feel shame, doubt. We tend to feel negative feelings about the concept of self, being deserving. I always say, I want you to picture yourself as a child. Go home and search through all your photographs. Find yourself as a 5-year-old kid, a 6-year-old kid, and look at that picture of that 5 or 6-year-old, and there's 2 things I want you to look for: deservedness and innocence. After years and years of living in this world, we tend to lose the innocence. We tend to lose the sense of deservedness. We associate our deservedness with our innocence. So can we associate deservedness with the loss of innocence? That's extremely important. Can we forgive ourselves for growing up? To really overcome dis-ease, we have to be willing to embrace and forgive ourselves for being adults, and to love ourselves at a core level, not at an ego level. We don't want to love ourselves conditionally. I'm not talking about loving yourself because you won the lottery. I'm talking about having a core love of that child that was 5 and 6 years old that's still living in your heart.
He would do that work on me to go in and really nurture myself. So I was able to reflect on the kindness that I do have, the tenderness, the love. And all he wanted me to do was, instead of putting it all on the outside, was to take it in and put it on the inside. I got off the cocaine, didn't drink, but sugar was the essence of an addiction that, again, I was a little kid. I'm 3 years old. I had a tooth pulled. They gave me a lollipop. I did something else. I fell down. A doctor gave me ice cream. So to me, sugar was nurturing. It was loving. And little did I know what it was really doing to me also. I was getting progressively sick again, just filled with mucus to a point where I thought I had pneumonia. It was horrible. And I lived like that, and I thought I was dying, and he kept saying, Diane, you've got to give up the sugar. You got to give it up.
Addiction is compensation for hurt. I have a hole in my heart that doesn't heal. Addiction takes sugar, love, money, whatever, from the outside, and it attempts to patch up that hole in the heart, which lasts for a short period of time. To heal the heart from the inside out is to occupy your own heart with your consciousness, to venture and journey into your own heart, to admit the pain, to acknowledge the pain, to confront the pain, to feel the pain, all the way through.
That pain transformed things in me where I have been reconnecting with letting go of the fight.
So people can be addicted to substances, they can be addicted to behaviors. I think control is one of the most powerful addictions that I see every day. One of the most powerful healing agents is when people finally get clear about the fact that by letting go, they support flow and not resistance.
I would cry a lot. I would feel, and I didn't even want to feel. I certainly didn't want to cry in an office, like that. But that's his magic. That's one of his magics, that he can just penetrate the heart. And eventually, I had a very profound spiritual experience. It just hit me between the eyeballs to get on my knees and ask God for help. And I gave up sugar. I haven't had sugar other than some fruit in 8 or 10 years, which is a miracle. I knew I could go somewhere where somebody unconditionally cared about me and was willing to hold the space until I caught up with it. If I didn't have Mark Mincolla in my life and I just went to a psychiatrist, a regular one, or I went to a regular doctor, not putting them down, everybody has their purpose, but in my life, I don't think I'd be here today.
We misidentify with a persona, a mask. The actors in ancient Greek drama or tragedy or comedy, they were wearing masks. As an actor, we wear a mask. Let me propose that as human beings, we wear what is known as human nature. It's a mask. When you take it off, that mask, what is behind?
We're programmed in this culture and in the Western world to believe that self is a personality with an ego. And self is all about value that has to do with performance at a certain level, I guess I'd say. Having a doctoral degree in health, all these things make me more attractive to myself. But if I don't have those things, or if I lose those things, then I'm suddenly not worth my own love, my own attention, my own care. And I'm not feeling loving, I'm not feeling complete, I'm not feeling whole. So I think it starts with a re-identification of self, not as an ego, not as a personality, not as a cellular being, but as a soul. It's much easier to love a soul than it is an ego. A lot of people that I counsel get in their own way and don't really know it. They're not totally aware of it. But there's a lack of faith in self, there's a lack of love in self, a lack of belief in self, a lack of willingness to accept power. It kind of intimidates people. Little old me having power, I don't know if I trust that. I don't know if I deserve that.
The fundamental thing that really all healers say, that really is the common denominator of what healing is. It's not about curing. It's not about ridding ourselves of something that we don't want. It's turning towards that which causes us suffering and holding it in a space of love. And what they're doing is helping us open to that space of love. And fundamentally, it's for us to love ourselves, because everything in the outside world is a reflection of our inside world.
Healing in part on the level of the mind is to be able to have a deeper understanding of the expansiveness of our own nature. You know, there's a field of what's called transpersonal psychology, which endeavors to understand the different features and times when that phenomenon can occur. If a person has this belief that they are their thoughts or some specifics of their environment, and something happens, whether it's a beautiful sunset, for example, where they just go a little bit beyond that current identity they believe themselves to be, and they find there's something, they're a little bigger, or they encompass more than they thought. That's a transpersonal phenomenon, as it's called. And so many realms of healing, I believe, attempt to induce these effects.
We need to understand that we're capable of tapping into an inner self that's a higher self, emanating from a soul self, a higher self, more than capable of performing miracles.
What is that invisible, formless, infinite entity that knows itself as the experience that we call the visible or the material? What is that? And do you know it? Do you know who or what you are?
At the ego level, there's separation, there's compartmentalization. At the superconscious, higher level, the Atman level, the Brahman level, there's only one. There's no more than one.
Healing is the return of the memory of wholeness from the fragmented mind to the whole mind, and finding out that you're a timeless being having a time-bound experience.
The Bhagavad Gita talks about the soul that is impervious. The arrows can't pierce it, the swords can't pierce it. The spirit can be broken, the heart can be broken, the body can be broken, the mind can be broken, the soul can't be broken. For 4 years, we planned this documentary. And to my mind, we were thinking in terms of bringing patients in that had gone through remarkable, miraculous recoveries. I never dreamt for a minute that I'd be involved in that process. Unexpectedly, I contracted Lyme disease. And lo and behold, it just pulled the legs out from under me. I lost my balance. I started to have tremors. I lost my strength. The pain was just indescribable. And it was so difficult for me to contend with, because it seemed to get worse and worse and worse and worse. And it was worsening for 4 years. So one night I fell, hit my head. I was on the floor for 14 hours, unable to move. I was paralyzed. To be isolated in your own mind, not knowing to what extent you're paralyzed, has a way of just isolating you within your own soul. There's talk about meditation being a process where you get into your core self in the form of pure consciousness, awareness, not thought. When I say my soul self, I landed in this place of pure awareness. I just wasn't able to think in that place, which is exactly what I needed. There's a point at which we make a decision to live or die, where we can cross over the line. I'm convinced that our spirits can commit us to the other side. And at that point, I had to walk to the end of my life in my mind and see who I was and what I wanted. So I had to make a decision as to whether I was willful about living or willful about not living anymore. I went to the edge of that cliff and I came back. And I finally was rescued off the floor. There was a 10-day period where I was unable to walk, unable to move. I had to be carried to the bathroom because I didn't know that I'd ever get my walking back. I never knew that I'd get my strength back. I thought I was perhaps permanently paralyzed. And that's a hell to live through, not knowing. So I finally had gone to the hospital and spent 4 days in the hospital and then a week in a rehab. They weren't sure that I was going to be able to walk either. Their determination was I wasn't going to get better. I was going to stay the same or get worse progressively. My first week in the rehab hospital, I was in the gym every day walking with walkers, doing the exercises I was given. And they were shocked at how much time I spent there and how hard I pushed. I was determined to create my healing, to energetically impose the most powerful energy that I could to heal. To me, everything is energy. Energy is about frequency, it's about vibration. In the truest sense, I believe that disease begins with dis-ease. The dis-ease in my life started long before the symptoms of Lyme disease. And dis-ease begins with a certain level of self-ignorance. There's a place deep within that has to be connected with, that keeps us well, that keeps us from being dis-eased. And I found that place in the bathroom floor after about 14 hours. Embracing miracles automatically insinuates that you have to embrace the difficulty, the sickness, the stress, the thing that brought you to a potential miracle. Holism is always happening. We're always exposed to both sides of the universal process, yin and yang, dark and light, pain and joy. We need to embrace the whole and make a decision to embrace wholeness as it is, not as we'd like it to be. Part of my miracle recovery is all about being unified between mind and body, coming from the soul and merging all parts of self in unity. I don't do anything against myself anymore. Everything has to happen in flow. There's a certain level of BS that we go through in this world. I had a lot less of that going on.
Consciousness interacts with everything because consciousness is everything. Because its very nature is to create. We fall into the trap, our own trap. It is our own trap. I want to emphasize that. People say, no, it's not my trap. You know, somebody created for me. My parents created. Okay, maybe somebody created for you. But now, who are you? You're repeating the trap of somebody. Ultimately, it is your own trap. You're trapped by your own mind.
The baseline of our embracing of a reality at a cultural level comes from our downloading, our programming. I'm not strong enough to make a miracle. I'm not powerful enough to make a miracle. Somebody else can make miracles, I can't. The Buddha can do that. Jesus can do that. Muhammad can do that. I can't do that. That's a mistake. That's a big mistake. Making a miracle is a possibility, but it begins with seeing it. It begins with accepting the possibility of it as being very real.
One of the aspects of that formless, non-local, infinite being is that it can modify itself as intention. So intention is inherent in consciousness.
So as a culture, we're at a place, we've arrived at this place where we desperately need to think in terms of possibilities, infinite possibilities, if you will. We need to think in terms of reformatting our ethos in a way that is not skeptical or doubtful, but rather expectancy-oriented. We're the creators of miracles. I think it's not a matter of waiting for miracles anymore. It's a matter of rolling up our sleeves and taking up the creatorship of miracles.
Consciousness is creating our life experiences, and biology now demonstrates it at the level of our experiences are manifest by this nervous system, which are broadcasting it in the field, affecting what's going on outside, affecting what's going on the inside. Change your thoughts, you change your biology. Change your thoughts, you change the world you live in.
Sickness, illness, disease, long-term fights, long-term stress, that produces really negative walls of energy. And they get thicker every day. They don't go away. You're just kind of sucking it up, showing up for another day of life. And it's another day of unhappiness. People have such thick, blocked energy fields to convince them that they have the power and the potential and the likelihood, the certainty even, of healing, of breaking through the threshold, putting a slit in this wall, and splitting it apart and walking through it. Yeah, I can't cross the threshold because I don't have enough money. I don't have enough money to get divorced. I don't have enough money to buy health food, organic food. I don't have enough money, strength, and time in my life. I'm too old, blah, 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 blah. There's never an excuse. And there's never anything in your way but you. And to take that step to say, I'm breaking through. No ifs, ands, or buts. No conditions. No conditions. We're not going to wait until it's sunny for this to happen. We're doing it right now.
We're trying to help bring medicine back to its roots, and medical roots prior to the advent of what we call the biomedical model in the West, or allopathic medicine. We're trying to cultivate the understanding of the importance of those elements of the whole person and to bring them into the practice fully of medicine. And the importance of the emotions, the importance of the psyche, the importance of recognizing the spiritual nature, we could say consciousness nature of the person. That is when healing can occur.
East is east and west is west. We've learned about material life here and they learned about energetic life over there. I think it's time we bridged the two and actually started to kind of make a wholeness out of it. And I think it's all about the holism of life, not the compartmentalism.
When we move from the model of pathogenesis, okay, the study of disease and getting rid of disease, to a model of salutogenesis, a model of healing and harmony, where we recognize there's a disharmony within us. So instead of trying to get rid of our pain or get rid of our depression or our anxiety, we're actually looking towards it and we're saying, what's here? Can I hold this space for a minute and allow what needs to come up so that it can transform into the next step? And that's where harmony is restored, and that's how healing really is happening.
Healing is a unique process. And I want to say that healers are everywhere. There's a healer in everybody. There's a healer within all of us. So to address each other from a deeper place, to address our own lives from a deeper place, is a way to heal the planet.